Hey, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of the Fiscally Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Highline. Today, I'm excited to bring in Bebe Kim. Bebe is a very close friend and business partner. Most recently, the co-founder and CEO of Bebes. Excited to dive in. And Bebe, let's get it going. Bebe, what is up?
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being a guest and our third guest on the Fiscally Awesome podcast. Very fitting because you and I have grown very close over the last few years. And I think this is our chance to finally write the book you and I always thought that we would write someday, building two
Yes.
companies in parallel, going deep into the accounting and finance space. But I think just to set some context for everybody, let's just talk about Bebe. Give me your background. You were kind of a traumatized professional service professional like myself as a lawyer. So take us all the way back.
Recovering.
Yeah,
That's
recovering
what they
professional
call
services
it.
career. So give us the background, like how you got started, the different companies you've been involved with. Give us the full story.
TLDR. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. I'm Bebe, and I grew up in Chicago. And in Chicago, there are only three professions to look up to. You're either a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. I wasn't left-brain enough to be the latter two. So, I found myself just gravitating towards delaying my career decisions through going to law school. So, I love law school. It's super fun. And when you graduate, you realize that, wow, you are in a solidly billable hour services where you're just selling your time to whoever needs it, right? And it was not the lifestyle that I envisioned having. I just found it to be very unscalable. I was always putting out fires. It's reactive 100%. And through the Great Recession of 2007, this totally dates me, I started a side project, this marketplace for lawyers, because I was like, hey, how do I scale services, right? Like we can pool the inventory of other lawyers. And this time, the .com things that were trendy were Yelp for X. So there's Yelp for doctors, and that's ZocDoc, and Yelp for dentists, and Yelp for whatever. I'm going to do the Yelp for. You always innovate. And sure enough, that became really successful. I wasn't aware that I was starting a startup, right? Because that term was even new. Like it belongs to the sort of sexy Silicon Valley, like Y Combinator tribe that is out there
Sexy
in
legal,
Midwest.
a sexy legal.
Yeah, exactly. And so started that, like formed a team, was just doing my thing and bootstrapped it. We raised money. It was a really foreign concept to me from my law professors and some of the mentors in our community, 500K in total ever, grew the business to a $6 million business and sold it to LegalZoom eventually 7 years later.
Well done.
One recurring theme is that every business takes at least 7 years to see itself, right? Come into its own teenage years. This is who I am. This is what we do.
I love that.
Yeah. It takes a
Being
lot
a
longer.
teenager at 7 in business years.
That's right. And how long? What about Highline? Like how
So
long?
we started in 2016. So I would say it took us 7 years to become a
Yep.
teenager and to make it to the
That's
next
right.
phase of business. So that's, yeah,
That's right.
that resonates. Yeah.
Yes. Not an overnight success by any means. So
Never.
so
It's like trudging through the mud for the first 7 years, and then you kind of figure it out.
exactly.
So you go to LegalZoom. So how long did you spend at LegalZoom?
LegalZoom at the time was like IPO bound, and so it's a very different stage of business. My mentor and acquirer was one of the founders, and really thankful for him. Like literally changed my life, and financially, from a professional standpoint, pulled me out of the Midwest into California. Never looked back. Shed all of my super heavy winter
Get rid
jackets.
of the coat.
Yeah, exactly. And grew into this company where I was able to see what a company looked like at Series D at the point, right? It's IPO bound. It's a very much mature business. There's VPs all over the place, bureaucracy, innovation, the board, etc. And so it was a really interesting time of experiencing the sort of like baby startup solopreneur into a small team and then suddenly in a IPO bound
Mhm.
tech company.
Yep. Yeah. So you do LegalZoom. You spend how long at
Yeah.
LegalZoom?
Yeah, so legal I finished my earnout. The earnout was 4 years. Everyone says, "Hey, it's people just bounce right after acquisition." In my experience, that hasn't been true. I only work with people who felt like I would be hired by them or team up with them
Yep.
anyway. Like just the cultural alignment was so nice that I finished the whole 4 years
Wow.
happily and learned a lot in terms of marketing, in terms of how to further drive innovation in professional services. So LegalZoom at the time was where people went to consumer. It's the top 5 legal brand name in the consumer mind, meaning if you pull someone off the streets and you're like, hey, name the 5 like legal law firm services, and they would be like LegalZoom, right? Like
Yep. Oh, like
apparel,
number
like
one for most people.
yeah, number 1,
Yeah.
right? And so the branding of it was amazing. We incorporate 1 in 5 LLCs in California was like incorporated on LegalZoom. Still today, it's where a lot of the companies get their start. And as you can imagine, that really threatened lawyers across the
Hmm.
country who LegalZoom, which is like really wrestled the whole what is a lawyer, what is do it yourself, right? So the way we try to carve out legal services from that legislation was like, well, what if we empower people to do it yourself? That's not a crime when you take on the legal consequences of your own legal work yourself, right? And so we created that market and expanded it as much as possible there, which is exhilarating.
So you go from professional services, lawyer, you go to LegalZoom, you learn how to become a marketer, and you learn
Yes.
product, right? You had product ownership over one of their.
It well, so the funny thing is like the product is the self-serve
Yeah.
document form. At the time, product was not just generally like the site was developed like on very old infrastructure. Like it's not, this is before cell phones,
Yep.
before iPhone apps, right? And so when we say product, it's really just like a series of 37 steps of filling out your
Yep.
incorporation or your will or whatever. But yeah, like we obsessed over every funnel, monitor drop offs. So it's more of a sort of like marketing, right? Like growth type of function in looking
Yep.
back.
And you got like maybe your first dose of inspiration for the service layer on top of a piece of technology in the legal space, which we'll eventually get to how that maybe was adapted a bit as you progressed into finance with basis.
My life's mission
Yeah.
to reposition services, and this is the underlying current, is like, how do we reposition service to be value or outcome oriented? It's like, I want to pay for this being done versus I want to pay for the hours you spent
Yep.
doing something, right? And so LegalZoom productized that. They're like, hey, I got my will done for $600. And so it just carrying that through the last 10 years, and especially in the age of AI, has become a journey that is very
Yep.
interesting.
So then you were Atrium was next. So you co-founded Atrium?
I moved to the Bay Area, the mecca of startup land, and now I'm like, wow, this is the Black
Got to
Belt,
start a business.
the
Let's
nation's
go.
capital. Yeah, right. Like when you're in the Midwest, people are like, we are Silicon Prairie, or in LA, it was like, this is the Silicon Beach, and it's no, there's
Yeah.
only one landscape, the Silicon Valley. And you and I just talked about it. Like the most money is deployed from Sand Hill Road in a matter
Yeah,
of
that was
blocks.
wild. Jeff dropped that statistic out there
Yeah.
with the disbursement of folks across the country. That was still interesting to know that it happens in that small little window of road. It's still where
Yes.
the majority or the most capital comes from.
And yeah, Matt, you went to Sand Hill Row for the first time a
You.
couple months ago. What did you think? What did you think it looked like? And what did it look like that surprised you?
Well, so I will first start by saying I totally get the Midwest thing, right? I'm in Syracuse, New York. I'm in upstate New York, right? So like we started the company here and fast forward 7 years becoming a teenager. And then I find myself on Sand Hill Road for the first time with you, Bebe, which felt like I had just finally reached my teenage years officially. Like I've now made it across into this ecosystem, which obviously led to a lot of great things like going into business with the Rhode Iron Group. But it's just a different world. It's you can't really explain until you go out there. There's energy, lots of enthusiasm for building businesses. Everybody out there that I've met is just really motivated. And I don't know that there's necessarily, and it's a different type of motivated. Like there's like creators. It's like a big creator ecosystem. It's not like going to New York City where everybody's in the rat race. It's like working for the man. Everybody's actually trying to build something unique and different. So very different vibe out there. It was a really cool experience. I have you to thank for a lot of that. So on the Atrium front, right? You take a swing at basically like
Right.
Atrium was like
So
essentially
now,
Highline for legal, right? So you're still in
yeah,
legal. You go to Atrium. What
So
were you trying to do at Atrium? What was the
right.
business model?
So to recap, right, like the first iteration of it was the legal marketplace. We merged, which is still services. It's just like a discovery interface for various different lawyers and services. The second iteration of LegalZoom was do it yourself. It's a productization of no lawyers.
Yep.
It's do it yourself law, right? The third iteration of this was very bold. One day I was on Facebook, and this is the kind of story that only happens in the West Coast. It's just like one day I was on Facebook, and that also dates me because who is on Facebook today? No one. But yeah, like get a
You still on Facebook?
message.
You still
What's
checking
that?
Facebook
I'm
every day?
not. I'm on Instagram, which is also on Facebook, right? Indirectly, or WhatsApp. But yeah, this is before the term DM was coined. But like, I get a DM from none other than this celebrity founder, Justin Kahn. I
Wow.
didn't even really know who he was. And I was like, oh, this is like a friend of my friend, apparently. And what's up? Like, he's, hey, I'm researching this legal idea. I've heard that you have experience in this productizing legal journey. Would love to meet up and download your learnings. And that's a very typical thing that happens out here, is that everyone is a social scientist, right? And my undergrad background is economics, and it's very much aligned with this, where you're just like, hey, I want to study a phenomenon in society, and I want to go talk to as many people as possible
Mhm.
about it, so I can download all the learnings of it. And so it's very open door policy. Everyone talks to everyone. After talking to him, I realized that he's brilliant. And he realized that I'm a lawyer who's different, and
Yep.
you really need a different mindset, right, to
And
innovate
for the record, if you're
in
not familiar, Justin Kahn was the founder of Twitch. So he's
yes.
obviously had a lot of success building his first company. So keep going, babe.
Yes,
Sorry.
like huge following. He's very successful, extremely smart. Yeah, and so he's, hey, do you want to join this thing that I'm building? It's Atrium. I'm trying to disrupt the legal market this way. And what he was talking about is wholly owning legal services, almost like starting a law firm and
Mhm.
then making it the most automated tech-enabled law
Yep.
firm possible. Very much like Matt said, like Highline, which is a modern accounting firm, and we're going to automate as much of it as possible. Yeah.
Yes. So Atrium, we had a good run there.
Was VC backed,
VC
so
backed.
that's
We had a
different.
good run
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
raised tons and tons of money. Didn't pan
Mhm.
out exactly the way you wanted, but obviously, like, you learned a lot from that experience that we've kind of talked about. And eventually it led you to starting Basis.
So I think that's like a key mindset. I keep reflecting on this, right? It's just what, like, because like you're like, hey, I'm a business owner, I'm a founder. Who am I? What is my key motivation?
Mhm.
Is it to make money? Is it to just be a creative, like you said, build something meaningful? Is it to, for me, it's actually, I'm a very thesis driven founder. So when I go into a space, I have a very clear social thesis that I want to find out the truth for. And it's very much, can this happen? And if not, why? It
Yep.
just, that's my key motivation for doing this. Atrium raised a ton of money, made a huge splash. It was very successful from a growth standpoint, but we ultimately failed for many reasons. And that's another podcast
What
for
are like
suffice it to
what are
say.
like the
Yeah,
like key is there like one or two key learnings that you took from that that you carried forward to the next business with Basis? Like
for sure. I think again, it's in the VC back business, and I keep learning this as I go into them, is that it's also very thesis driven, but it's a moonshot or die situation because VCs are not in it to benefit from a linearly scaling business. They want outsized returns from a few businesses. And the long and short of it is that the we were too early. There was no sort of technology that was present to be able to create this sort of software growth
yep,
in a legal service at the time.
yep.
So that's the key
You would
takeaway.
have to
Yeah.
build all of it. Ecosystem was not there. There wasn't off the shelf technology that you could bring in to make it easier. And this is also a big market education problem too. The world is just not used to anything but their red wallets. And you got to come in and sit in
Right.
my boardroom with my cherry door and my cherry door frame. And that's just kind of how we do business.
That's right. It was just too early.
Yeah.
An extremely talented group of people too
Yeah.
early. Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember hearing about Atrium and it was super splashy and so cool experience. So then you go and you do like some investing, right? Like you spend some time in the investing world, a little bit of an operating timeout. And you've explained to me the inspiration for starting Basis, right? Obviously, Again,
Right.
another arm of professional services. We're talking finance.
Yes.
You've got all this experience in your rearview mirror. You spend time like advising founders or looking at pitch decks and making investing decisions personally. Also, I think probably with Upper 90 at the time, you were doing some work with them. So, all of you like wrap all that up? What was the inspiration for Basis? And then we'll kind of get
Yeah.
into our story together after
Oh,
that.
for sure. So one interesting thing is that a lot of founders, especially the ones in the West Coast, the line between founders and VC is very blurry. We're all angel invest on the side, and we're like talk to other founders who are investable, etc. And you're always curious. You're like, what if I become a VC? Because then I just talk to founders all day, and I love doing
Yeah,
that.
super
And
fun.
yeah, totally. And so then, but so that was one motivation for me to just kind of experience that. It's like, what is it like? Is that how much of a founder am I? And once you do that, like people fall into one or two camps. They're like, oh, wow, like I am an investor. This is amazing. Or they're like, nope, I'm a founder and I'm in the latter category. I, the mindset of a investor is just very different. It's all about capital allocation. It's about betting on a horse race, right?
Yep.
Which horse, that type of thing. And it's a very macro view. You're very attached to macro trends and that influences your thinking, etc. Whereas for me, I really love building products and teams and being in the trenches and in the running. And so that experience made me realize I am really a founder. And the way that is also like that when you see a pain point, you're just sucked in to rather than, oh,
Yeah.
this is a great
Yeah, you
company.
can't
And what
obsess. You're like not sleeping. You're like laying in bed. You're like that. I can fix that.
I need to explore this problem deeper, talk to everyone and start that whole journey. Also, I felt like I thoroughly explored legal every which way, every business model
Yep.
within that chain across a span of a decade that I just didn't feel there were interesting venture opportunities in that at the moment, right? But something that was tangential was finance. And because I was playing investor, I experienced the pain of funders not knowing their numbers. And
Yes.
there's a lack of financial clarity among all the founders, including myself included, every journey. It's what was my revenue? Like,
Mhm.
what happens? Right. And it was a problem that resonated with me. I love that it has this like services element and product opportunity element. And so I was ready to just dive in.
So you said a couple things, right? It's like you investors' mindset is capital allocation, right? And you're
Yeah.
saying, I'm a founder and I see this problem where other founders don't know how to allocate capital super well.
Yes.
And Basis was born out of a belief that you could build a platform that helped people visualize their financials in a way that promoted better capital allocation decisions. So
That's right.
you're bridging the two together. And so maybe just contextually, like how did Matt and Bebe meet? Who introduced us for the first time? Do you remember this?
Oh, of course. It's our mutual
Was it
advisor who
Maxine? It was
invested
Max.
in
Yeah, it was Maxine. So everybody knows Maxine because Maxine is actually our first guest on the podcast. Highline had always the first version of our service was like we always had this. Everything was a virtual CFO offering, and it was accounting and accounts payable, and it was payroll, and it was taxes, and we felt like if we did all of those things, then we could advise any company in the small business ecosystem and basically become like a virtual CFO. And that's how the whole thing started. For years, we tried to figure out like how do we scale forecasting, budgeting, and planning for businesses because accounting is all about recording history and looking in the rearview mirror, but that's only so helpful to know where you've been. You kind of have to know where you're going. So that's how we met Bebe. I met Bebe. We were trying to figure out how do we use a platform to build something super scalable to do budgeting and FP&A to round out the business we were building. So like that's where our journey begins, right?
Yes.
That first, and I remember
Yes.
meeting you, and you had so much energy. I was like, "Holy, wow!" Like she's just super motivated to do this. So can you talk like a little bit about Basis, when you started Basis, kind of how you built, like what was
Totally.
important to you as you were kind of building it? What were you learning about finance and how well like
Yeah,
the market understood what you were trying to do? Let's start there.
totally. So at the time was COVID. And again, I stumbled upon this problem through my like little stint on the investor side and it pulled me in. And as it was pulling me in, interest rates were dropping. investors had pools of money
Yep.
to throw at the earliest stage of ideas, right? So I was just like, this is interesting to an investor, and here's money, go investigate further. And at the time, later I find out that many different founders had the same idea. There's 100 FP&A tools out there, like Basis, right? And different financial sort of like stack ideas. And so much so that there's now this category called CFO software.
CFO tech
And exactly,
everywhere.
it's CFO tech. And right. And it's a recognition that like right, CFO tech is like, hey, when you look at products, a lot of them are innovating around sales and marketing. There's like really nice CRMs, great like website generation tools, etc. This back office has been completely neglected. Everyone's working on Excel and legacy systems. When is this function in business going to get its update, right? It's almost like the last category
Like
for SaaS to penetrate.
Excel
That
last
was the
stand. They're like bunkered.
yes.
Excel's bunkered in, just
Yes.
protecting its market share.
That's right. And it's just this is the last sort of green field for SaaS for software to finally eat its way into that part of the business. And so I think all of us are really intrigued at the potential. Like investors also had the appetite of finding out just what is that potential in many different work streams. There's AR, right? So many great businesses started in that. There's credit
So much
cards like
money being
Ramp
dumped
and
into
Brex
it
and
right now. It's
yeah,
everywhere.
exactly. So all the workflows in finance were getting a facelift and challenged by founders. I picked the strategic finance one because that was the one that I was exposed to and was just really interested in. I also felt like there was even less. Later, I would find out there's a lot of competition, but at the time, I was like, "Oh, this is a purely Excel situation. Like you're not ripping and replacing anything. So there should be room for innovation."
And there is. And so Bebe was Bebe's basically like the one who brought me into the venture ecosystem. Was like my first real experience getting to know a founder as deeply as I got to know you. Like lots of exploration around how we could round out our tech stack with Basis and FP&A platform. But you were the first one that kind of brought me into and opened my eyes to like that whole world. And
And likewise, you were the one who pulled me into what is the most optimized a
we're,
accounting firm can be.
yeah, the best, right? Highline is number
Yeah.
one.
And where is there still opportunity? So like the fact that you had every tool figured out and integrated except for the FP&A thing was also to me a data point of this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
it was like the convergence of our thesis mission has always been small business. And that encompasses also venture backed SaaS companies because we think about it as 50 employees or less. But it was the bridging of I was trying to solve this problem for small businesses, getting more deeply involved with the venture ecosystem and the technology companies in the ecosystem. And it helped unlock my thinking a lot just about how to use technology. So you and I started working together probably 2 years ago, right?
Yes.
2 years ago. And
Yeah.
how long? We probably talked daily for 18 months of our 2 year relationship as we were trying to figure out how do we like take all the technology. I think you and I learned a lot about how to define a service layer for the
Yeah.
thing that we were trying to build, right? The technology was great, but there is a service layer that exists somewhere that just feels like it needs to be evolved and be different because the technology is capable of doing so much more. And that whole experience taught me a ton and evolved my thinking just about how Highline was going to be scaled in the future because it's all about redefining the service layer. And how many iterations of partnership did you and I go through in
Oh
that
my
two
gosh, we're
years?
still going through
We're
it.
still going through it. But
Yes, yes.
there was times I would meet Bebe in San Francisco, would meet New York, and we would hypothesize around, should we be one company? Should I be software?
Yeah.
Should you be services? Could we build like the best tech-enabled accounting firm and finance firm in the world? Should we maybe raise VC? And then we'd go back to, should we maybe merge again? Maybe Basis should acquire Highline. Maybe Highline should acquire Basis. We went through so many iterations of that in pursuit of like the thing that we're trying to build. So for me,
And in the course of doing so, I think we also, both of us, looked at the different types of capitals supporting small businesses
yes.
and their motivations. And so traditionally, this is another topic of where I'm fascinated is just every business needs funding, right? You're either bootstrapped you're funding yourself, still
Yep.
funding out of your own profits. And the way you run that business is very different. Your motivations are very different.
Yep.
You have a lot of control, but you have very little resources to go fast, right? And then on the other end of the extreme is that you get stuff with money from VCs who are only interested in you pursuing a moonshot situation.
Yes.
And in between, there's this huge space of businesses that are, would need more resources and investment to grow,
Yep.
and would grow at a very healthy rate and be very considered to be very successful by anyone's definition, except for VCs.
You can't do
And
300, 200, 200, or 300, 300, 300. Like it's crazy that it can be considered a fail. So I agree with you. The majority of
yeah,
businesses with potential live in the middle, and there isn't
exactly.
great options out there for them.
Right. And that's why you and I just kept, right? Like, we're like,
Yeah.
well, this is not hyper growth, but we also don't want to bootstrap it. You didn't want to keep bootstrapping Highline. And so it was like, what is there that we can do to
Yeah.
like mix
We
this
were
thing
modeling the businesses together
up?
in basis and
Yeah.
how we work to see if we could make it work. So those were good
Right.
times. And yeah, so like I think we were smart because we were methodical and we're
Very
smart enough
methodical.
to
We
know that.
literally mapped out every
Yeah.
scenario. We're like scenario A, scenario B, like,
Yeah.
which is what you're supposed to do
Supposed to
with
do that. And
finance.
that's
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies rush for funding, financing. They think that it takes venture to build a great business. And sometimes that's true because it requires so much upfront capital to build it. But if you're gritty enough and if you're a good capital allocator and you're good at allocating your own time, you can't scale and build a great business without venture. And if you can do that, you have maximum optionality. So I'm glad that you and I were
Yeah.
pragmatic enough to just say, you know what, we should just kind of do it this way. And it worked out, right? Because through you
Yeah.
also, by chance, is how I met Ben and the Red Iron Group. And for Highline, our capital partner via private equity ended up being the absolute right decision for us. And we have a great partnership with them. And we're off
Yeah.
building. And with Basis, with you guys, you ended up in a
Yeah.
good position too with your recent
Yeah.
acquisition by the Digits team. So congrats on
That's
that.
right.
And here we
Yeah.
find ourselves again working on a partnership. So
So maybe I should recap some of my learnings on the
yeah,
basis front, right? So like basis started off as a venture. I already decided to take venture capital, which only meant let's discover if there's like a exemplar business here. And the conclusion of that was no, not in this workflow.
yeah,
And ironically, so the reason why is that, why isn't there that much opportunity in FP&A that I found? I think other people would, obviously that's just limited to me and my journey. But my current conclusions are that it just got so crowded, right? It's just like a red ocean of different solutions dueling at each other. And from a marketing messaging standpoint, everyone was saying the same things. It's really hard to tell a difference internally. So it became like a VC fundraise arms race in that way.
yep,
And then the second part was that FP&A is an output of accounting. So it's a total garbage in, garbage out situation. And fundamentally, we found that we were dependent on the legacy accounting systems to create clean data, right? So we're like, oh, we would just pull from QuickBooks, NetSuite, all this stuff. But the problem is that all of these systems are 20 years old plus,
yeah.
and they weren't even cloud
Plus,
native. They were like
really plus. There's a
transition.
plus side there.
Yeah. Right. And so the whole business of FP&A just became like, how do you most efficiently deal with or migrate data from 20 plus year legacy systems? And I liken it to playing the latest game on your phone on a iPhone version like five versions ago, right? It's just like it's so hard to apply the modern technology, et cetera, on the FP&A side, but still having to rely on legacy systems to produce
Yes,
clean data.
and people to
And
do it the right
yeah, exactly. And it became like an implementation thing. It's just like to clean up the data, you do need Excel. And so that is why Excel actually exists. Like it's not that people love Excel, it's just that there's so many edge cases and so many data hygiene issues that is the best tool to deal with that, right? So once I came to that realization, I was like, do I want to be in a implementation business?
Mhm.
Is that venture back? And the answer is no. Coincidentally, I met Jeff actually hilariously through Matt. It's like this whole
I guess
circle.
circle. It's all coming together.
It's all coming together, who is also just knocking at Matt's become this like accounting innovation destination where all the founders and all the tools just come to Highline to say, hey, is this worth adopting? Right? It's been really great. So Jeff has been
I'm
innovating through
accounting
digits.
tool. That's funny. I
Yes.
try to explain what I do to Beth, my wife, and she doesn't think it's cool at all. I'm winning, at least in the accounting world. So keep going. All right.
Yeah. Well, in this podcast, you are fiscally awesome. So like, that's the qualifier. You're not just awesome.
Winning.
Just
Fiscally awesome. Only.
um, so yeah, so Jeff has been working on this new accounting system, and I was like, wait a second, that's been the biggest blocker of us getting the data needed to forecast forward. Him and I started talking, and we're like, wow, both parts are really important, and let's build this together. So that's how Basis joined Digits.
Yep. Yeah, Jeff's working on
Yeah.
some super cool stuff. We're gonna have Jeff on pretty soon too, so we can talk more about that. So, baby, one thing that I think is often undervalued and not talked about enough. We talked about how important relationship capital is. This podcast is about being fiscally awesome, and certainly we want to promote good capital allocation and thoughtfulness and how you deploy money. But I actually think relationship capital is more valuable than financial capital. I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive either.
100%.
So as you look back on our 2 years, right? Not all of those days were easy. Not all of our conversations were always smooth. But one thing that you and I share is we place tremendous importance on relationship capital and the
Yeah.
long-term payoff of doing good business with each other and always looking to strike mutually beneficial partnerships and relationships. So talk like, how do you think about that? And like, what was the experience like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think you and I have always talked about this, right? And so, and I think we were hippie about it at first. We were like, it's this karma thing. It's intangible, but I feel it. You feel it too,
Yeah.
right? Yes, that sort of a thing. And, but it's this concept of there's a financial balance sheet, but there's also this sort of like relationship balance sheet that people who value relationships kind of have it in the back of their minds, right? And it's not like a tit for tat situation that would be actually not very transactional, but it's like it's not transactional. But it's very back and forth, very emotional deposits,
Yeah.
all around,
Scar
right? And it's
tissue
like you need
accumulates.
to,
That's a real thing.
yeah, it's a real thing. And I think our description of it was like very hippie, but nevertheless, we shared that value.
Mhm.
And that's what pulled us through all these iterations of partnership. Is we do it this way. No, that's not personal. Let's do it this way. No, like I recognize the risks, right? And so being transparent with each other. So you're by far the best business partner I've ever worked with. So that is amazing. But I think what firmed up this concept for us was Matt from Red Iron, who
Yeah.
was, you know what? This makes financial sense too. It's not just a hippie
Yeah.
concept, because the way it makes financial sense is that the people who do recognize this are going to just transact together adjacent to one another. And one day you will benefit from it.
It's
Maybe not
delayed
immediately, but it
delayed
like
financial
comes
capital.
back.
There's a delayed financial component to it, and
That's right.
I think most people are too impatient to let relationship capital mature and accrete in value,
That's
and
right.
they don't actually, I think, they're not aware of it, and they don't actually know how to use it well, and then most people, I think, destroy it unintentionally because it's
That's right.
transactional
Unintentionally or extract prematurely,
or
right? Like
extract
it's like,
prematurely. Yes.
hey, you didn't make a deposit yet. What are you extracting?
Yeah.
Or hey, I made a deposit. How come you didn't recognize that? And so it's very amazing when you find a group of people who, Jeff included, that's why we
Yep.
immediately clicked. It's just like you have this recognition that there is this relationship depositing system
Yep.
between you. Yeah.
Why? So I think it becomes obvious to you the more you try to do business with people over time. And what percentage of people do you think are actually transactional versus value
Oh,
relationship capital? Like non-binding, like gut feel, just based on recent experiences. I'll tell you mine too, but you go first.
that's really good. Yeah, no, I think it's not that I was always aware of this as well, right? And there's also like a chemistry component as well. It's just not everyone who you encounter who are otherwise relationship oriented
Mhm.
would have a relationship with you necessarily. And so I will say the percentage of people that I surround my with that are like this is higher and higher because I look for it now, I
Yep.
optimize for it.
Yep.
But largely, if I back away from that, I would say, gosh, like literally sub 10%
Sub 10. I
of
was
people
going to
that,
say it's less than 10% of
yeah,
people actually, I think, are aware of how valuable relationship capital can be. And they're
that's right.
optimized for the short term. And they leave so much value on the table down the road. Don't know when it's going to happen. Don't know what circumstance. Don't know the fight. It could be $5 or $5 million, but it's just that's like a human psychological thing that we'd have to check with probably Maxine to have her unpack why humans orient
That's
in that
right.
direction. But yeah, I think that's man. If any we did anything right, I think that we did that well. So we made the partnership well, and here we are. So we
Yeah.
talk about look, we just signed a partnership with Digits. I think by the time this airs, it will actually probably be out there in the world, anyways. Is that
Yes.
fair? Do you want me to?
Oh,
Do you want me to announce it?
absolutely.
You want to announce it, or do you
It's,
want me to do it?
I think you just
I
did.
just did it. Yeah, so we're super pumped. I mean, Digits is doing some cool stuff, and you'll learn more about that when Jeff comes on. You'll learn more. You'll probably over the next 6 months learn even more. But we are excited at Highline. We just signed a partnership agreement with Digits to basically move all of our clients onto their platform. It's a lot of AI generated reporting and insights and dashboards that our clients will be able to interact with. My thesis and hope is that our clients will get a lot more out of seeing financial information, the ability to like kind of query and dive into kind of what's going on in your numbers, having to tell you what anomalies are out there, what's changed, what you need to be aware of. So really cool experience that I'm excited to roll out to our clients. We're going to do it 1-1, but we just inked this last week and we're working on a press release and we're happy to lean in and just get to work.
We're
The
super
saga
excited. So
continues.
yeah, no, while I am in love with this problem from like a business perspective, right? Matt brings the accounting expertise to this and tools implementation, assessment, of course. And Jeff is just, you guys will learn this next week. He was one of the head of products at Twitter, consumer product. Like he's a just tier one entrepreneur through and through. And it took on the product challenge of actually creating a modern accounting system. And what you'll experience from that, what business owners will finally be able to experience is just this clean data from the start, right? Like you can't get clean data by having already used something else. This is the Ferrari of
It
accounting
is a
software.
Ferrari.
And
It's super.
yeah, it really
Yeah,
is.
we're excited about that. Baby, if I had to ask you one more thing before we wrap it up. So
Of course.
you've been through 4, it's your 5th business that you've been part of? 5th?
For oh, fifth, yeah,
5th
like
business
digits
with
would be the
Digits?
fifth.
You
Yes.
founded 3 companies. You worked at LegalZoom right up until they IPO'd. So you saw big business. You've seen small bootstrapped. You've seen the venture route where you've raised a lot of money and more responsible, like raising a little bit of money. So what advice would you give to somebody out there who is, I want to start a business? If they're like 2 or 3 things or even one big thing that you've learned, what is it?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that every business owner, like a true founder, is a curious person. So this entire journey is to follow your curiosity type of
Mhm.
journey, right? And I think the difference between a founder and executive is just we have this curiosity. We are hybrid creator and business owner, which are slightly different. But having these two identities on you, you're like being creative about doing a business, basically,
Mhm.
right? And will give you so many insights about yourself, about how you view the world, how you want to be known, what you want to be known for, etc. So going through this has truly been the most enlightening personal and sociological journey ever. And I find just that intrinsically rewarding. And if you don't find that intrinsically rewarding, you're going to burn out emotionally
Yes.
because chasing money, there are many better ways to chase high income.
Yes.
Like you can become a lawyer or bring it back, exactly, or a banker,
Yeah.
right? There's just so many better ways of hitting it big monetarily. And that's not what this is about. This is really a personal passion and curiosity driven journey.
It's not work. If it feels like work, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So
That's right.
if you
That's right.
took all that, what if you had to like seed one thought about what you've learned about managing financial capital, being a founder, bootstrapping, fundraising. What have you learned in hindsight about how important it is to manage your company finance as well?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it comes back to what is the type of business that
Hmm.
you are building. Like at a certain point, right? Like you come to a point where you have to make that decision. It's is it a small business? Is it a venture-backed business? Is it a hybrid business? And the good news is that there's capital and investor types for each part of the business. And we even proved it with the middle with
Yeah,
Highline.
there's
Like it's like,
banks
yes,
too.
there are investors.
Yeah, there's banks. There's traditional ways to get it too.
Exactly. And so having just an abundant mindset towards that vision is that there will be capital there. What do you want to build? How do you want to build it? Right. And then having the courage to build that and then connect with investors to convince them that you are fiduciary, you're a good fiduciary of their money and this experiment, whatever it is probably the core of managing capital. And then there's the other things that you delegate to a firm like Highline, because then you're going to go on and just run your business
Yep.
and execute, right? While the money movement that's happening will just be reconciled, recorded, summarized, reported on to you by a professional accounting
Yes.
firm.
Plug and Highline. I love that.
Yes.
I've never raised money before.
That's
I
not
always felt
true. We
like,
just did.
well, kind of, but not in the same way. I always felt like if I was an investor someday, I would almost want the founder, and this probably isn't possible in all cases, but to have bootstrapped a company first or
Mhm.
bootstrapped the first version of their company first to learn what it's feel the pain of having to make payroll, having to make trade-off decisions, et cetera, because there's real lessons in there. But if that's not possible, it's almost like, I think if you're going to start a company, could you start it without capital and be successful if you had 5 years to do it? And if the answer,
So,
oh, go ahead. I
yes.
was going to say, if the answer
No, go
is
ahead.
yes, then you should like probably think about, if I raise capital, can I get there faster in the next 18 months? But you should feel like you have conviction that you could do it without venture money because there's a real business there. And I think you'll approach
Right.
it differently. There should be no question in your mind that if you had to do it with your laptop and we work, that like you could still build a business and make money, personal money, like lifestyle money someday. But I think sometimes people just raise money too quick without like real conviction or vision for what they're trying to do. It's become like a little sexy just to do it.
Right. Like it's become a vanity metric to raise capital. And as our good friend says, the only good thing about raising capital is capital.
Capital.
Right? So the money, it only is good, and everything else is not as glamorous as
Yeah.
that, eight-figure, seven-figure would
Yeah.
suggest. And of course, some projects, if you have the clarity of the scope of the project that you want to build, it could just be that it does require venture money. So if I'm building
Yes.
a skyscraper, I
100.
don't want to bootstrap that brick by brick. It would take forever, right? And so, however, I would say like in the AI age, who said it, like Sam Altman or something, is this is the era where it's possible to be a one person billionaire,
There's
right?
going to
And
be lots of micro
yeah,
businesses, I think.
yes,
Probably the generation that's like graduating high school now, that's grown up knowing what AI can do for their personal lives, will have a deeper appreciation for how they can build a business with it. So I think you're going to see this in the next probably 10 years.
that's right. So it's so exciting because it again challenges what type of business is so capital intensive that you would need this much money
Well, I
to
think it's
do.
going to be far. I think you were saying it's going to be less capital intensive. So it'll be interesting just to see what gets done just in the business world in
Right.
general.
Or I'm just saying the bar of
Yeah.
capital intensive business just got so much higher. Like you must be going to Mars or like,
Yeah. Like seriously, like SpaceX, like I'm going to build rockets
Yeah.
that are going to go to Mars in 20 years.
It's always like a creative destruction sort of process. And I think living in San Francisco, you just see it. And that's why I also just like love living here. There's driverless cars running around and Waymo
Yeah.
versus Uber, right? It's just very interesting to see all of these
Yeah.
iterations come about.
Super
Yeah.
cool. Well, I will see you there next week, baby. So I look forward to
Yeah.
having you on again. Thanks for sharing all those awesome insights. Thanks for joining today. And we'll check in with you soon. Have a good rest of your day.
Definitely. See you soon.
All right. See you, baby.